Everyone, welcome to my in-depth analysis of Astram. Before we start, I want to extend my thanks to you all. We have reached over 1,000 subs, which is a weird milestone to me. I never expected to get that far. I don't really know what to even do to celebrate this. Frankly, I don't have time to do anything more, but do know that I'm quite happy about it, and thank you all. But let's now talk about Astram, shall we? So Astram comes in with obviously Gen 4 BST, therefore his stat line looks quite good. Let's start with his weapon before we get to the rest. His weapon is quite underwhelming. You have to realize, as far as infantry unit goes, anything that has an hyper-offensive stat line really likes one of two skills: Desperation or Wrath, none of which combos into his weapon, because his weapon needs him to be at over 50% HP to work. It's a 19 might sword, and outside of this, it basically just grants 4 across the board as long as you have 50% or more HP to him and anyone within 2 space. So there's 2 issues with this. First off, it requires him to be over 50% HP, which doesn't work with Wrath. And second, it only works on physical fighter. Now, tell me any time where you would want to have this weapon over Brave Lucina's. I want you to realize before you even think about it, Brave Lucina is a drive buff, okay? Mercurius is a visible buff. This can backfire. Now, the problem with this weapon is essentially you cannot not have it up. So what happens when you have to deal with panic a bunch, like an AR? Guess you'll die, because that's just going to be 4 across the board loss every time if you can't get out of the situation of getting panicked. And sometimes you're gonna lose support as a result, and it's just not great in general. His HP is decent at sitting at 44 until you realize the fact that you can't refine this weapon, so that's 5 HP down the drain. It might as well have 39 base HP at that point. So yeah. The other problem also is the fact that this is visible buffs, meaning it's not a drive, so what's the point of this buff? It can be helpful to, well, for one thing, you can support Levitain with it, a much better unit, by giving her essentially 20 more attack, as well as 4 speed, 4 def, and 4 res. Now, here's another issue with that, though. It's the fact that they're both swords. Kind of foolish, considering he's meant to also be a fighter, isn't it? Yeah, that doesn't work too well to have 2 sword units that essentially fit the same role, except that one of them can also somewhat buff. At that point, why aren't you using Marth? You know, a unit that can work with every unit, mage included. It feels a bit pointless. And if the goal is just to buff physical units, Brave Lucina also has a breath effect added to her lance, meaning it's just better overall. Not to mention having Dragon Effectiveness, which while not amazing, is at least something better than Attack plus 3. So, yeah. That's not great, is it? And you can combo this into bonus doubler, but then you're even more worse off the second you get Aversad or Panicked. There's so many ways to get panicked nowadays. It's not even funny, so relying on visible buff like this that you can't just like run away from to be like, oh, I don't care getting panicked, at that point I don't have any buffs, then that's kind of bad. It just removes an option because you always are buffed. The other thing is, his base kit is weird. I don't think he was meant to have Wrath in the first place. I genuinely don't think he was meant to have Wrath in the first place. Wind Boost requires him to be as high on HP as possible, Mercurius requires him to be over 50% HP, and then Wrath requires him to be under 75%? smells fishy to me. I feel like it was meant to be a different skill, but considering the response of people concerning Gen 4, they decided to be like, yeah, you know what, we should probably give a skill that people really like and really want for a long time for free. Wrath is a fantastic skill, phenomenal skill in fact. Units such as Nyla only needs Wrath to really work as an offensive monster if you don't want her to just be a DC no-see disrupt unit, which she doesn't really pull off too well. She is at her best as an all-offense unit, so it works quite well with Wrath. And she already has DC, so at this point you basically have the full kit for free. Believe me, Nyla is quite strong the second you slap Wrath on her kit. Mine is +8, so granted, I've already invested in her, but I can assure you, she is well worth it. Another unit is obviously Ira, though Ira also wants to have Distinct Counter as well. If you don't have Distinct Counter, well, it still works, you just have to invest in Double Brazens instead. But obviously Distinct Counter is a bit better. That said, Double Brazen is better in Arena unless it's a Legendary Azura or Legendary Almweek, in which case, don't. Let's just put it as simple as that. Just fucking don't. But yeah, I don't think Ruff was part of his kit to begin with. They just ended up adding it reactively toward the way people feel about Gen 4 and how it completely denies any kind of unit they've invested in to some extent. If you've invested in a unit for nothing but stats, then yeah, and guess what? Astram is another one of those units that's nothing but stats, because as we mentioned, Mercurius is not really a great weapon. Another thing to note is the fact that, well, he does come with Wrath. The reason why I say this is because if you do decide to merge him, for whatever reason, honestly, you shouldn't, but let's say you do. And let's say you got the copy from the rerun Astram will most likely get. That means you need 7 copies, that's 350 Grail, plus the base 100, that means the next copy after that, because the 450 is the last copy you've bought, but it'll be 500 Grail. So, if you want Wrath at all, it's not going to cost 100 Grail, it's gonna cost 500. This is honestly the main reason why you should not merge him. Though I will say, if you want to merge him to +1, that's still a good idea, because he actually has more attack than speed at level 1, meaning his offense will jump to 37-37, which is not bad with 36 defense. That said, it's not exactly unique. You see, Ogma has a fairly similar stat line, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Still, at the end of the day, Wrath is a very, very monumental skill to get in the Tempestral GHB unit slot, so again, I would not try to merge him, I would just try to hold on as many copies as I can. 20k feathers is a very cheap price to pay for Wrath. And with that, let's move to the first merge. As I mentioned, he gets attack +2, so yeah, that's a pretty good first merge. That's why I said if you want to merge him once, that makes sense. You get 2 attack and 1 speed, it's worth it. That said, anything beyond that is not exactly needed. He'll work fine with only +1, and at that point, spending any more than that is just hurting your fodder, because, like I said, Wrath is a fantastic skill. Now, let's go to comparison. Obviously, I'm gonna bring out Soleil. Soleil has more attack and speed than Astram the second you go with Speed Plus. If you go with Attack Plus, you're at 40 speed, which is not even that far off. At 41 speed, sorry. You're only 1 point of speed behind him. Not to mention, you end up with 6 more attack with Attack Plus. It's ridiculous. Not to mention, Soleil is a bit better as far as mixed bulk is concerned. And do not let the HP here fool you. Yes, there is a gap of 7 HP, but you have to realize that Soleil will have a refined weapon. If you're going with Mercurius and Astram, that gap becomes 2. If you switch to a different weapon, which you should, then yes, it is 7 bulk. 7 HP difference. And yes, there is 7 def difference, though, like I said, Soleil has 4 more res, 2 more speed, and 3 more attack, which is by no means irrelevant. Oh, and she also has a super boon in res, so you could just not refine. You could just get a res boon to end up having 34-34, which ends up being, well, overall, in my opinion, better than Astram because you end up being able to take more damage. And the other one is Ogma. Now, this might look like the only thing that he has really going for him over Astram is HP. That is not the case. Gladiator Blade is actually quite a good weapon. It has Heavy Blade built in, which already there, that's amazing. But the Refined itself gives 4 attack and speed as long as he's around an infantry or flyer unit. The 2 strongest move type of the game. I would be surprised if you can't find anyone that fits this. I'll just say that. In which case, he ends up with 4 more attack and 2 more speed than Astra, as well as 3 more health, and he's only behind by 4 def and 7 res. Oh, and actually, he is 6 HP higher because his weapon is a refine. So 6 HP, 4 attack, and 2 speed, at the cost of 4 def and 7 res. Now, Astram has a bit more bulk, but Heavy Blade built-in is quite good, especially comboed with stuff like Mystic Boost, or, like we just said, Wrath. Many skills can combo into that quite well, so it is definitely worth mentioning. You could even just run Ignis, for example, and with Ignis and Wrath, you can just hit for 2 charge, get hit, and then proc Ignis for quite a bit of damage. So yeah, all that to say, Ogma has a very, very strong weapon to combo into, and Ogma is in the 3 to 4 star pool, just like Soleil is. At this point, what really is the point of Astram? Well, I'll say this. It's not bad. Like I said, the set to the left is for Mercurius, and the set on the right is if you ditch Mercurius. So this set is just all about staying over a high HP so Mercurius can buff you. Bonus doubler double those buff. HP Rest 2 is to essentially potentially shut down those panic ploys. And the other issue is because since you need your HP to be always high, Astram runs into another problem. You cannot use Brazen with Mercurius effectively. Or rather, you may be able to use both sometimes, but some other times one will be active while the other one will not, and then when you try to push the other one in, it's going to make so that the other one won't work. It's not great, it's not consistent at all. Especially if you have to deal with a dragon, for example. If you have to deal with a dragon, you lose so much HP most of the time that Mercurius won't be able to keep up, which means your bonus doubler is going to die. Mercurius is such an awkward weapon. Not to mention, like I said, it doesn't really buff mages, which means it promotes you to limit yourself to very specific team comps. So, yeah. As a result, you can't really use bonds because you'll be sometimes moving to deal damage. You can't really use Brazens, again, because sometimes you may take too much damage, which will kill Mercurius. It's just, you can use 30 blow, but then you don't have an enemy phase. There are so many issues like this, and it doesn't really work together all that well. So HP Rest 2 becomes one of the better choice you have. You can probably use Attack Rest 2 if that becomes a seal sometime. is not yet. I don't think it is. Or any such skill, and as you can see, it's very awkward to use a seal that can combo into Mercurius, Bonus Doubler, and Mystic Boost. But it's really the best way to get Mercurius to be consistently up. So it's like, okay, what do I do? It's awkward, to say the least. As for Slaying Edge, I do want to mention, real quick, with Mercurius and Bonus Doubler active, Astram reaches 53 HP, 67 attack, 49 speed, 48 def, and 35 res. Now, let's go to just the stats right now, okay, of Astram with Slaying Edge. Alright, you're looking at 54 HP, so 1 more health. 67 attack, oh look, it's the same attack. 47 speed, oh, I'm behind in speed, oh, the humanity, especially since 47 is all you really need. 53 def, that's 5 more def, and then 49 res, 14 more res. Do you see the issue? Oh, and guess what? This is an Ira build. Guess why? Because Astram, for God's sake, is an Ira of Gen 4. If you want me to talk about the type of unit that have a very similar stat line, just look at Legendary Marth, Legendary Roy, Ira herself, Nyla, Veloria. There are so many Ira clones at this point. It's ridiculous. So him being a Ira of Gen 4 is no surprise to me whatsoever. But yeah, this is typically how you build an Ira, except instead of Ruptured Sky, you run Ragnal Astra, so... Ruptured Sky allows you to, because of Slaying Edge, it becomes 1 cooldown, to just proc, get hit, and proc. Even if you're not fighting a dragon or a beast unit, it's typically going to give you 10 damage per proc. Rafa is going to push that by 10, and that's why you want to have as much bulk as you can. With 53 def and 49 res, you can just proc, get hit, and proc again, safely. That said, stuff such as Special Fighter can actually become a problem. That said, most of the strong Special Fighter user are dragons or beasts, and therefore, you can just typically one-shot them, potentially. But yes, I do think the set on the right is far superior to the set on the left. It's just I decided to also showcase a set using Mercurius, in case somebody wanted. Both of these sets are usable even at lower merges, do keep that in mind. You do lose a bit of speed on Astram, in which case you may want to be running Brazen Attack Speed instead of Attack Res as the seal. And that's kind of it. Because then you end up having enough speed anyway. So, yeah. Surprising no one. He's not quite high on the tier list. I decided to highlight him this way. Let me know how well this looks. I'm not too sure how easy it is to notice. I hope it is easy enough, but it's kind of hard for me to really highlight more than this. I'll see how this goes. If it's okay, then it's okay. If it's not, well, I'll try to do something more. We'll see then. So don't stress too much about it. But yes, he's an A+ character. I do think Mass Marth is overall better. Mass Marth gets 4 across the board next to someone, or 5 across the board, 1 in Desperation. It allows him to have a lot more flexibility than Astram, and actually have a pref that helps him, rather than, well, the thing Astram has. I do genuinely think that Sealed Falchion is a lot weaker than Perry's Lance, for instance, but it's still decent enough to work with Brazens. And she has a good offense of 34-36, which is not even that far off from yours truly, Astram. So, yeah. That's why she's a bit below. Honestly, I was debating putting him in A tier, because Lloyd can now combo Infantry Hexblade on Nino or any other mages, with like double attack def bond to make up for the def problem that he had, which makes him very, very strong. And like I said, Infantry Hexblade combos into his sword, which on top of it gives him 3 across the board, so quite good. Joshua is a bit strange. At plus 10 he ends up having just good stat all around. Astram ends up having more offense, but the fact that Joshua actually has a rest stat, and a def stat, and an attack stat, and a speed stat makes him quite decent. I do think at plus 10, Joshua is overall a lot better than Astram, and Navarre at least has his weapon that allows him to just dish out AoE almost instantly, or Gale Force, or anything of the sort. And if he has an AoE immediately, you can just combo this with Special Spiral. So I do think Astram is probably the weakest sword unit of A+, but he's still decent. Like I said, he's not exactly worth merging up, but he is a decent AA pick, probably with an Armor Smasher if you decide to get rid of armored units. Since he has good attack, speed, and def. That's kind of just what it is. He's better than Rutger, at least. At least there's that. And, yeah. So, yeah. In conclusion, he's alright. He's nothing really to write home about, but he's okay enough to be used. Just like I said, don't be the type of fool that just pushes the cost of Wrath to stupid amounts, because then you're going to regret it when you get a new unit that you really want to invest in, and you really want Wrath to make it work nearly as well as it can, and you cannot use it. But yeah, that is all I have to say about Astram. As per usual, I'll be seeing you all later or on Discord. Have a nice one, y'all.